So we can bow in together. So, welcome back everyone to the Buddhist Path of Awakening class on Francesca Fremantle's Luminous Emptiness about the Bardo Totral, Liberation Through Hearing, Tibetan Book of the Dead. Tonight we're going to be talking about the final chapter, chapter 15, titled At the Womb Door, which relates to the final bardo before the dead person is reborn in a new body. As usual, before beginning, I wanted to say just a few things before we actually launch into the chapter. One thing is that I actually want to read from both the Book of the Dead, her original translation that she did with Trungpa Rinpoche, as well as some pieces from the chapter that we actually did read. It's interesting to me looking at the two. In some cases, as is the case, I think, with every person I've ever heard translate, it seems like translation is just a continuous work in progress, and that, or process, and that in a couple of cases she's translated things just a little bit differently than she did in the initial translation that in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But then in other places, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is really quite evocative and poetic in its images, and really conveys something of the feeling that I would assume that someone experiences at different points in the bardo. So I want to also read from her original translation as well. She has selected excerpts from the Book of the Dead in all the chapters that we've read, but there are also things that are left out that I think are interesting or relevant or helpful. So just to say a little bit before we actually launch into the chapter, what seems to be happening throughout the process of the bardos between one's death and point in time where one is reborn, but in particularly true in this bardo, the bardo of becoming or bardo of existence, is there's an increasing solidification, an increasing sense of self and a sense of other. And with this increasing solidification, this increasing sense of a self, there's even more and more intensity in terms of hope and fear. More and more intensity in terms of actually all the emotions, because again, once we create that dualistic experience, then we have a sense of the world as something that either we want to draw in, that we become attached to, hopeful about, or things that we wish to avoid, things that we become fearful of, so that there's increasing solidity around that dualism. And I think that's really, really clear in this bardo in particular. And that this is something we work with in meditation practice, that when we're told to just remain in awareness and let our sense perceptions, our thoughts and emotions, to just let them be without engaging, meaning that we don't try to grasp at them or try to push them away. We don't analyze, which just leads to more confusion and grasping or aversion. We simply see. When we're able to practice, when we're able to really settle in meditation, we just see what's there. Sometimes the expression in some texts is we leave it in its own place, which means that we don't try to take it in or push it away. Passion, aggression, and we don't ignore. There's no ignorance either. We just simply see it with equanimity. And this aspect of practice, and again, it's not that we create this in meditation. If we were, then we would not be acting in an equanimous way. We would have some sense of something is better than something else that we're trying to accomplish. So in fact, the simplicity of meditation is that by simply relaxing and letting things be, we develop this, we cultivate this, or rather we recognize our capability of doing this naturally. And this is why the sense that in meditation we can naturally settle is very important. And also we realize that we can be open to whatever we experience in meditation practice, that ordinarily we're quite selective in what we pay attention to and ignore the rest. and that in fact we can just simply be open to our experience without judgment, without effort, just simply open being. The other thing, so I think that's just something to consider as we work our way through this bardo of existence, bardo of becoming. It's actually true of all the bardos, but in particular this bardo, because of the intensity of hope and fear, the intensity of the grasping, and the intensity of the fearfulness that leads to eventually solidification into a new body. The other thing I wanted to say just a little bit about is just remind people about the nature of karma. You know, karma, as people know, is a word that literally translates as action. Ultimately, and even relatively, it's said that really only a Buddha fully understands karma, which is why you'll have statements in some texts where the Buddha will say a person experiences such and such a thing because of some action, that, you know, they swatted a mosquito or whatever action it might have been. So that karma, because of the infinite variety of causes and conditions, really is something that only a Buddha can understand. But we can get kind of a sense of it in regard to two aspects. One is the idea of karmic momentum, that that our thoughts, our words, and especially our actions create momentum in certain directions. And we can see this quite clearly in meditation practice, and even people who don't meditate have some sense of this, because it's quite clear in our experience that, for instance, if we're already angry, it's very easy to become irritated by the next thing. If we're already feeling aggrieved and victimized, it's very easy to feel obstructed and aggrieved by whatever it is that happens next. Whereas at other times, when we're in a very different state of mind, the same things might be fairly meaningless or even humorous to us. So that you can kind of see that with karma, that there's a momentum. There's a momentum from one thought into another. There's a momentum in our emotions that... And it's this momentum that drives us through this bardo. The other aspect of karma to keep in mind is the notion of habituation, which is I think, fairly well understood term in terms of Western psychology. But the habituation that's involved in karma isn't simply that as we over and over again indulge in certain states of mind, passion, aggression, and ignorance, that it's easier and easier to find ourselves in those states of mind again. If we, for instance, scroll through social media and read all the things that can trigger anxiety, all the things that can trigger resentment, all the things that can trigger envy, it becomes easier and easier to have experienced those same emotions again and again. And I think this is well understood, but it's habituation in an even deeper level, in that karma isn't just simply feelings, but it affects our perceptions. It affects who we think we are. It affects what we think the world is. And that this, again, is very much what is really becoming increasingly solid, increasingly intense, increasingly forceful with the bardo of becoming. So with that, let's begin the chapter. We keep those things in mind. So she starts the chapter by saying, after fainting with terror, the dead person awakens as a bardo being with a subtle mental body. So this subtle mental body is not exactly the same, but is similar to what we experience in dreams, where in the dream, a dream is clearly entirely a mental phenomena. There's no action going on in what we tend to call the real world. It's clearly happening within our mind. And yet our experience in the dream is that we have a body, and that this body is threatened or pleased or entranced, or whatever we might experience in the dream. But there's very much a sense of having a body, and a sense of a world of some kind that's external to that in the dream, even though it's clearly all mind. It's clearly all mind. And this is essentially similar to what the dead person is experiencing now in the bardo of existence, the bardo of becoming. I'll read just the introduction in the Tibetan Book of the Dead to this part, because again, I think it's fairly evocative. It seems like I'm fumbling around. It's because I'm trying to find the right pages. Okay. Although the bardo of Dharmata, which is the bardo that we were previously in, although the bardo of Dharmata has been shown many times before this, apart from those who are adept in meditation on Dharma and have good karmic results, because of fear and bad karma, recognition is difficult for those who are not adept. So from about the 10th day onwards, they should be reminded again in these words. And remember, the entire purpose of the Tibetan Book of the Dead is for a guru, a friend, somebody to read to the dead person, to remind them over and over again about what they're experiencing and how to make a good use of the experience, provided that they can recognize. O child of noble family, listen well and understand. Hell beings, gods, and the bardo body are born spontaneously. When the peaceful and wrathful deities appeared in the bardo of Dharmata, you did not recognize them, so you fainted with fear after 5.5 days. But when you recovered, your consciousness grew clear, and a body like your former one rose up. It is said in the Tantra, with the former and future material body of the bardo of becoming, complete with all the senses, wandering without obstruction, possessing the power of miracles resulting from karma, seen by the pure eyes of gods with the same nature. So this is what we wake up into in the bardo of becoming, the bardo of existence. Which lasts from the moment where the person wakes up after fainting in the bardo of Dharmata until they enter their next life. So in terms of, again, Francesca Fremantle's translation of this bardo as bardo of existence, rather than bardo of becoming, which is a more common translation, what she talks about is, in terms of using the term existence here for bardo of existence, is the sense of self and other, the body and the external world, are all brought into being by the mind through the power of desire and grasping. So that's what's becoming. Again, that it's through the power of karma, karmic habituation, through the power of grasping, that an entire world and an entire sense of one's body begins to come into being. And as she says, existence in Buddhism always implies duality, and that there's always a sense of self and other, self and something external to self. And that this always involves the three marks of existence: suffering, egolessness, and impermanence. And with that, she then gives a very overall description of the bardo before going into particulars. So this is just an overall description of the bardo of becoming. She says this is what most people conventionally think of as the afterlife state. That it's in this bardo that our past life is summed up and our future is decided, dominated by the law of karma. It's here that the consequences of all our thoughts, words, and deeds take form in front of our eyes. And she says that this is a volatile, fluid state, full of terror and suffering, which is very clear when you read the Book of the Dead directly. But by fluid, what she means is that everything is very changeable, that the mind isn't settled in a body, so that whatever the mind thinks of, the mind creates on the spot. It's like what we experience in a dream, where we can be in one setting and then find ourselves in a completely different setting and never question it in the dream. It's just the next thing that happens. It's just like that. It's fluid in the sense that our perceptions and the environment around us are constantly changing as karma ripens, as the effect of past actions come to the surface. And this is why in the text, it actually says at one point in the description of the bardo of becoming, it's your own karma that you are suffering like this, so you cannot blame anyone else. But one aspect of karma, and one aspect again of the notion of duality, is we tend to project blame, because we don't see how it all arises out of the habitual tendencies of our own mind. She says that the timing of the instructions to be read and how long this bardo lasts varies, that there's no real, again, in the bardo there's no real reference point of a sun rising and setting in a 24-hour day. It's entirely a very relative sense of time, that so that an instant can seem eternal and a long period of time can go by in a flash. But she says it's usually 1 to 7 weeks, but it can go up to years. And that some commentators say that every 7 days within this bardo of becoming, there's an experience of death, dissolution, dharmata, and reawakening in the bardo of existence. I think one of the interesting things is that in this chapter in particular, she at times does a good job of connecting experience, the bardo experience and the bardo of becoming, with experiences in daily life and what we experience in daily life. She says this can be compared to our present life, where the sequence of dissolution, entering a space of infinite potentialities, and reemergence takes place constantly in many different timescales. So, again, if we slow down and actually look at our experience, we see that that's true, that what we might have been feeling this morning is very different from what we might have felt, how we might have, what world we might have been experiencing, where we were at noon, and very different again here at class. And that in between, there's constant dissolution, potentiality, solidification, arising, and dissolving again. And that we experience this moment to moment. We experience this in meditation practice, where we perhaps begin with some sense of what we're doing in the practice, that we want to stay present, but within a few minutes we drift off into thoughts, and then the thoughts dissolve, we come back and we begin again. So we can, I think it's quite clear in our actual experience, let alone if we look over bigger time spans in our lives, how much impermanence and change there is. I've always said for myself that when I say I meet somebody new and I'm talking to them about, well, how did I get to be where I am in my life? I can tell a fairly coherent story. First I did this, then I did that, then I was here, then I was there. And, it all ties together as a nice story. But the reality is, in a lot of different points in time, I had no idea what I was going to be doing next. And if I think back to, or have some recollection of how I felt, for instance, when I was in college or when I graduated, relationships before I got married, I had no idea what was going to happen. So there's actually a lot less of a coherent. We can create storylines that make things seem sensible, logical, understandable, smooth, and but the reality is, if we actually look at our moment-to-moment experience, it's there really is a lot of exactly what she describes: dissolving, potentiality, things coming together, and then apart again. She also relates this to even just our activities in daily life. That and I heard Andrew Holacek gives a very similar description. He talks about similitudes, that falling asleep at night is like the experience of dying. That there's a letting go of everything. It's obviously not the same as dying, but that there's a similarity. That then when we are asleep, we dream. And this has some similarity to the bardo of dharmata, where we see things, we have visions, we have dreams, we experience sights and sounds, maybe smells and tastes more rarely, but some people experience all, physical sensations. All these things can happen in dreams, but they're not real, they fade away. And then when we wake in the morning, it's like coming back to existence again. And so the bardos are not too hard to understand if we actually look at our moment-to-moment experience in life. So as she says, in waking life, a dominant mood fades away and leaves a gap of uncertainty before another emotion replaces it. And all the time, fleeting thoughts and feelings come and go. One state of mind dies, there's a moment of openness, then another state of mind is born. And she says that if we can see that, and this is by the way, what she's about to say is exactly what we're told if we have studied the Lojong slogans. If we can see this as a play of illusion, we could avoid grasping at the chance of rebirth in the bardo of becoming, just as we can in our daily life. But instead, most often, we're not aware of this process in daily life. We are living in a world of our concepts, we're living in a world of our thoughts of the future, our past, and we're not present with our experience. So we live in dreams, we live in absorption states where we're totally caught up in a thought, a feeling, a plan, a project. We're caught up in ignorance. And when we do that, we take as real the things that we project with our minds. And we think of them as something then that we should that we want to possess or avoid. But again, if we're actually able to stop and look, then it's, again, not hard to see something of how the bardo experience manifests in our life all the time. Anyway, she continues talking about her overview description of the bardo of becoming. I still prefer that to bardo of existence. And she says, as we emerge from the state of luminosity, again, the experience of the bardo of dharmata with the peaceful and wrathful deities, and the initial experience of luminosity at the moment of death, she says we begin to experience three visions of light in reverse. This piece, by the way, I did not find in the Book of the Dead, so I'm assuming that she actually got this from some of the other sources she used, other texts, like 100 Homages, I think was one. Other texts that she's referred to in terms of talking about the bardo state. But the basic idea, if you remember, on pages 229 and 230, there is a description of what happens at the moment of death. The idea was that there's a white bindu that we receive from the father and a red bindu that we receive from the mother, and the two come together at the heart center and merge together. Well, in this point, and then we experience white, red, and black light, and this is part of what happens in the bardo of dying. But in this case, it's reversed. We're increasingly solidifying, increasingly taking on a sense of self, a sense of a body. And with this, all the 80, what she calls the 80 instincts of passion, aggression, and ignorance, all those mental factors become activated. And she says that the subtle forms of the elements begin to arise in reverse. So if you remember in the bardo of dying, earth dissolves into water, water dissolves into fire, fire dissolves into air, air into space, and then space into consciousness. What's happening here is the reverse. Again, increasing solidification in reverse. So consciousness into space, space into air, fire out of water, water from fire, and then finally earth, the most solid element, from water. So again, there's this increasing coming back together, solidification that's happening. She says the reappearance of these subtle phenomena create the mental body of the bardo determined by karma in the source consciousness, which is her word for the Alaya Vijnana, the eighth consciousness, which is where the seeds of karma are. And she says this in the bardo being at this point is a Gandharva. A special kind of, she describes it as a special kind of hungry ghost. So it's not a material thing, but there is definitely a sense of body, again, like in a dream. And she says at this point we're not in the six realms, but if we remain for a long time without finding a rebirth, we might become an actual hungry ghost, because again, we have some tendency toward that as we're manifesting as a Gandharva being. Gandharvas are in traditional Hindu mythology, beings that exist as ghost-like, immaterial, and they live on smells and scents, but only on food that's offered to them. But they can feel hunger pains. But anyway, the point is that the karmic imprints that from the Bardo body are impressions left in the source consciousness, the eighth consciousness, the Alaya Vijnana, which create patterns tending towards certain modes of existence, characteristics, and environments. So again, we're beginning to our experiences increasingly being shaped by karma. What we think, feel, see, perceive comes out of this momentum and habituation of karma. And she says, and again, this is just her summary of what's happening in this bardo. At first, memories of the previous life are strong, and so we feel that we still possess our old body. But then that connection, our connection with the body, fades away, and the tendencies that pull us toward a new existence begin to take over. This is interesting because I definitely can see this in my life. I remember, when I moved to Colorado in 1978 because Trungpa Rinpoche was there. But I would go back east. Most of my life lived on the East Coast, except for a few years in Michigan as a child. And when I traveled east for the first couple of years, I always felt like I was going home. But at some point that shifted. And it was like it was very clear to me during one of my trips home to see my family, and with Sue to see her family as well, that I was visiting and home was going back to Colorado. And in the same way, at some point, Connecticut became home. So I think if people think, I'm sure other people have had similar experiences unless you have lived in one place your entire life. That you can kind of see how we have a connection to the old place, but then eventually connections to the new place begin to develop. But in this case, it's actually leading to rebirth. Otherwise, it's just kind of a natural thing, and I'm not saying that it's particularly a problem. It just is how it is. She says that the form that manifests in the bardo is a perfect, ideal body that's immaterial, it casts no shadow, leaves no footprints, has no reflections. But again, the intelligence is 9 times clearer. I think it's similar to what's said at the bardo of dying, or actually at the moment of death, that consciousness is no longer veiled or by the body, so that it's freer, more open, more clear. And that there are various supernormal abilities like clairvoyance, that this mental body, that Gandharva body that's created in the bardo of becoming, bardo of existence, can pass through solid objects. Because it isn't solid, it can go almost anywhere just by thinking of it, which again is sort of like what happens in a dream, where we can find ourselves in all kinds of different places. The only 2 places it can't go is in its future mother's womb, because then it is reborn. And it's also said that it can't be in the Vajra seat, which is literally where the Buddha was attained enlightenment, in Bodh Gaya in India. Although I've also heard that expression said to be that it couldn't be any place where actually there is awakening, because if there is awakening, then you're no longer in that body, you're awake. And that actually would be a good thing, because at any point in the bardo where you recognize and awake, then the entire bardo experience comes to an end. And you then have the opportunity to either be reborn in a pure land, or become fully awakened and actually as a Buddha, and choose to be reborn in a place where you can work for the benefit of beings, which is ultimately the purpose of our bodhisattva vow. It's pointed out that the supernatural powers are explained as a temporary result of karma, and that they're not real spiritual attainments, although they have some similarity to attainments, but they're not genuine spiritual attainments accomplished through meditation, and so they should not distract us. And yet they can be helpful to us, because this is precisely why we're able to see and attend to instructions that are read to us as a dead person by someone reading to us the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Again, that this clarity, this clairvoyance can actually be quite powerful. The way it's described in the Book of the Dead, and talking about your former, is that first you have a body like your former one of flesh and blood because of your memories of it, but it's also radiant and has some marks like a body of the Golden Age. This is the experience of a mental body, so it's called the mental body of the Bardo experience. At this time, if you're going to be born as a god, you'll experience the realm of the gods, and whatever you're going to be born as, jealous god, human, animal, hungry ghost, or hell being, you will have that experience. Therefore, former means thinking for up to 4.5 days that you have a material body of memories of your former one, and your future body, that you will means that after that you will have experiences of wherever you're going to be born. So they say former or future. And again, the instruction, as always in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is whatever projections arise at this time, do not follow them or be attracted to them or yearn for them. If you're attracted to them or yearn for them, you will wander in the 6 realms and suffer misery. So this is her description of the nature of the Gandharva, the mental body that manifests in the Bardo of becoming. And the reason for all of this description, again, is because it's being read to us, and so that we can understand what's happening to us, that we can understand that this is the point that we're at in the Bardo. She talks a little bit about the divine eye, that this is one of the experiences that or one of the attainments or powers that this mental body in the Bardo of becoming has. That it's similar, again, has some similarity to the divine eye of the Buddha. One of the attainments of a Buddha is the divine eye, that a Buddha is capable of seeing beings in all 6 realms with clairvoyance. And this is one of the reasons why a Buddha is able to act skillfully to benefit beings. And this is how gurus can see us and communicate with us in the Bardo. But this isn't exactly what the Bardo being has. It's more like in the Bardo, you begin to have experiences of this, as it says in the book, if you're going to be born as a god, begin to see visions of the god realm. Human realm, just visions of the human realm, and so on. That it's a state where the supernatural vision in the Bardo state is where beings of the same kind who are going to be born in the same realm are able to see each other. And again, all of this, the reason for describing all of this is simply so that we realize where we are in the Bardo. So when you're in the Bardo, remember that. Anyway, the point is that in addition to this, again, at first the person doesn't know that they're dead. They'll feel that they still have their old bodies, and they can't understand why nobody responds to them. This is similar, again, to the experience that a person might have had briefly during the Bardo of dying. But again, we don't recollect that experience apparently at this point. So again, we have that experience again of trying to communicate with people who don't respond to us, of looking for some kind of connection that just doesn't happen. And she says with this, there's a sense of experiencing tremendous despair and frustration. I think this is, if you've ever seen the movie The Sixth Sense, the movie with Bruce Willis about it's not exactly about the Bardo, but I do think they got some of their ideas for the plot of that movie, where the boy is able to see dead people, and as he says, they just see what they want to see. They don't know that they're dead. And there's a similarity, I think, to this. What we're told is the experience of the dead person in the Bardos. So anyway, they don't know that they're dead, and that they're blown by the wind of karma. And this again is one of the evocative passages, I felt, poetic passages in the Book of the Dead. So I will read it. O child of noble family, blown by the moving wind of karma, your mind without support helplessly rides the horse of wind like a feather, swaying and swinging. This is, again, the person is actually perceiving people in the world, but they're not responding to him. You'll say to the people mourning you, I am here, do not weep, but they will not perceive you. So you will eventually realize you've died. So you will think, I have died, and now you will feel great pain. But do not suffer like that all the time. So, and again, this can go on for a number of days. But blown by the wind of karma is a way of expressing what I was trying to describe before, karmic momentum, that it's when there's no awareness, then we're just swept along by karma, like a flood of water or like a very strong wind, exactly, like a feather in the wind. Anyway, so what Francesca Fremantle says is, in the previous bardo, the bardo of Dharmata, our true nature was revealed in its basic state of purity as this, as she says, the self-manifesting form of the deities. But now our confused nature appears as demonic apparitions arising from karma. So again, there's more solidity, more duality, and more projection. Just as in life, when we're I think it's easiest perhaps with aggression, when we, or with paranoia, mistrust, that when we really strongly feel that way, we project that onto others. We see the world that way. We see things that normally don't bother us, or things that don't disturb us, or anxiety for that matter, things that normally don't frighten us or don't cause us to feel shaky, do, because we're projecting. And that's exactly what's happening here. She says that the elements begin to appear as enemies, like with crushing earth, floods of water, scorching fire, violent winds. She says all our inner demons, the karmic results of the harms we have done and the hurts we have caused, pursue us with vengeful fury. Just like the Furies in Greek mythology, if you're familiar with that. Actually, this part was a little unclear, and it was a little clearer in the Book of the Dead. Actually, what it says in the Book of the Dead is that might have two different kinds of experiences. One relates to people who, as it says in the text, have led evil lives, and one experience of people who've lived good lives, decent lives. So first, the experience of people who have lived evil lives. And again, this relates to her description of our confused nature appearing as demonic apparitions. O child of noble family, at this time the great tornado of karma, terrifying, unbearable, whirling fiercely, will drive you from behind. Again, the instruction, do not be afraid of it. It is your own confused projection. But then more description. Dense darkness, terrifying and unbearable, will go before you with terrible cries of strike and kill. Again, do not be afraid of them. In the case of others who have done great evil, many flesh-eating demons will appear as a result of their karma, bearing various weapons, yelling war cries, shouting kill, strike, and so on. You will feel that you are being chased by various terrifying wild animals and pursued by a great army in snow, rain, storms, and darkness. There will be sounds of mountains crumbling, of lakes flooding, of fire spreading, and of fierce winds springing up. In fear you will escape wherever you can, but you will be cut off by 3 precipices in front of you, white, red, and black, deep and dreadful, and you will be on the point of falling down on them. O child of noble family, they are not really precipices. They are aggression, passion, and ignorance. Recognize this now to be the bardo of becoming. And then we have the instruction, what we could actually do if we're able to recognize at this point, which is to call upon the Lord of great compassion. This is Amitabha Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva of compassion. O Lord of great compassion, my Guru, and you also can supplicate the Guru and the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. O Lord of great compassion, my Guru, the 3 jewels, do not let me, and you actually would say your name, do not let me fall into hell. Supplicate fervently like this, do not forget. So that's the experience of people who have lived great evil lives. But if they're able to recognize at that point, they could still perhaps turn things around. In the case of others who have gathered merit and were virtuous and practiced Dharma sincerely, all kinds of perfect enjoyment will invite them, and they'll experience all kinds of perfect bliss and happiness. In the case of those who are indifferent and ignorant, who did neither good nor evil, they will not experience pleasure or pain, but only ignorance and indifference. But whatever arises like this, O child of noble family, whatever pleasures and objects of desire, do not be attracted to them or yearn for them. So again, not practice, let go of grasping, let go of attachment. Instead, offer them to the Guru and the three jewels. Give up attachment and longing in your heart. And if the experience of indifference or indifference arises without pleasure or pain, rest your mind in what's in here. It says the great symbol state of undistracted non-meditation. This is very important. That's Mahamudra meditation, basically. So again, again and again, as we've heard through every other part of the Book of the Dead, we're reminded again and again that all these experiences are the natural self-display of our own mind. And we're saying self-display again as a way of trying to get across the idea that even though we experience this habitually in a dualistic way, in fact it's just like a dream where there's an apparent illusory duality, but it's clearly all just the projections of mind. So again, these experiences are all the natural self-display of our own mind, and we must not fear them, but we're also, as we just read, also warned against attachment to the illusory appearances resulting from positive karma and against an attitude of apathy. If we continue through the bardo, if we are not able to recognize, not able to rest in the nature of mind, which is essentially what great symbol Mahamudra meditation is, then we continue to be tossed around by the winds of karma based on our good, bad, and neutral actions. As it does say in the text, although the disembodied mind has supernormal powers, it is unable to settle down for any length of time and longs for rest. And again, this is similar to what we experience in meditation practice when we're scattered and just go from thought to thought, feeling to feeling, worry to worry, hope to fear, fear to hope, and so on. At some point, again, as the realization that sinks in for the bardo being that they actually have died, then there's despair. It's said, your heart will suddenly grow empty and cold, and you will feel intense, boundless pain. So again, in the Book of the Dead itself, you'll think, alas, I am dead. What shall I do now? And thinking this, your heart will suddenly grow empty and cold, and you'll feel intense and boundless pain. Since you must move on without settling in any one place, do not occupy yourself with all kinds of thoughts, but rest your mind in its basic state. So again, to go back to just simply allowing the mind to settle in one place. And again, I don't think it can be emphasized enough, the practice of meditation that we do in our lives now is the best preparation. It's not just allows us perhaps to lead a more mindful life now, hopefully that's the goal, but that in the bardos it's extremely important to be able to know something about how to settle the mind or how to let the mind settle. So at this point the body begins to, the Gandharva being, the mental body being in the bardo, begins looking for a body, a solid body. And it's said they actually try to re-enter their own corpse if they're drawn to that. And again, it's said that at this point, there's still an opportunity, there's still the possibility of attaining liberation at this point. And it's said that this can be done in one of three ways, either through faith and devotion to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, through deity meditation, if there's a visualization, if there's a person who's worked with visualization practice, or just by simply resting in formless meditation, simply resting in the true nature of mind. It's mind's luminous emptiness. She says, during this bardo, the habits formed by one's practice during life and the connections with one's guru, that current of adhisthana or blessing, are extremely important. And it just, again, the text at this point goes into some of the possibilities that Vajrayana practitioners could transform the Vajra body, the bardo body into their deity and go to a pure land or take birth in favorable circumstances to complete the path. However, if we do not recognize, if we continue to be drawn, then we're continuing to be drawn along in the bardo. We then face the judgment of Yama, the Lord of Death, as is described in Luminous Emptiness. He's described as a huge, terrifying, demonic figure, huge and black with the head of a bull. As she says, he represents the voice of our conscience, the innermost knowledge of all our secret motives and intentions, even when we have disguised them from ourselves. This is in the translation in the Book of the Dead. I'll describe this. I'll read this part. O child of noble family, listen. It's your own karma that you are suffering like this, so you cannot blame anyone else. It's your own karma, so now supplicate the three jewels fervently. They will protect you. If you do not supplicate like this, and do not know the great symbol meditation, that's again Mahamudra meditation, and do not meditate on your yidam, the visualization practice, then the good conscience within you will collect all your good actions and count out white pebbles, and the bad conscience within you will collect all your evil actions and count out black pebbles. At this time you will be very terror-frightened and terrified, and you'll tremble and lie, saying, I have not sinned. But the Lord of Death will say, I look into the mirror of karma. And then he looks in the mirror, I will look in the mirror of karma. And when he looks in the mirror, all your sins and virtues will suddenly appear in it clearly and distinctly. So although you may have lied, it's of no use. So then, as she says, he will drag you by a rope round your neck, cut off your head, tear out your heart, pull out your entrails. This is just, again, I think in very graphic form, exactly what we experience when we know we do something wrong and our conscience, this was wrong. And it can be a very painful, powerful experience of what that means. Again, the instructions remind us not to be afraid, that even this experience comes from our own mind. So in other words, even though we may have this projection of some kind of terrifying judgment figure with the head of a bull or however what we might perceive, that it's still actually our own mind. It's our own mind and its awareness of what we might have done in our lives that's been unskillful, been harmful to self and other. And again, the instruction, difficult as it is not to be afraid. As she says, we panic and lie because we believe in the external reality of these events, and when we confront the truth about ourselves in the mirror of karma, our guilt makes us feel we deserve to be punished. And again, I think we can see that in our everyday life, that there are times when we get carried away with self-punishing behavior because we make solid and real things that really are manifestations of mind. And what really helps is actually our practice at this point. That's what really makes a difference. It's through cultivating awareness and knowing our minds and knowing what we're feeling, knowing what we're experiencing, that we actually can avoid harmful actions and be skillful in our interactions with others. So that, generally speaking, self-punishing behavior is not actually helpful. It actually reinforces ego. Anyway, to return to the text at this point gives us instruction on simply looking into the nature of things and resting in the uncontrived state expressed in terms of the three kayas, which the empty essence of the Dharmakaya, the luminous expression of the Sambhogakaya, and the unobstructed manifestation of the Nirmanakaya. This is one where actually she provides a translation of this part of the Tibetan Book of the Dead in her text that actually I think is a little better than the translation that she did in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So I'm actually going to read this one. The instruction at this point, if we're able to recognize I'm in the bardo of becoming, I'm experiencing all these terrifying visions, I'm experiencing all these painful feelings, this is karma coming to fruition. If we're able to actually practice at this point, this is what's recommended. Meditate on the samadhi of Mahamudra, the great symbol. Yes. Meditate on the samadhi of Mahamudra, the great symbol. If you do not know how to meditate, look closely at the essence of who it is within you that feels fear. and you will see an empty essence where nothing whatever exists. I'll read that one line again because she translates it differently in the original text, the Book of the Dead. Look closely at the essence of who it is within you that feels fear, and you will see an empty essence where nothing whatever exists. Again, if we have enough stability to look at the looker, to look at the experience, and say, what is it that's there, then we can have a glimpse of emptiness. This is what she's describing. That is the Dharmakaya. But this emptiness is not blankness. The empty essence of your fear is a wide-awake, clear awareness. That is the mind of the Sambhogakaya. Emptiness and clarity are inseparable from each other. Clarity is the essence of emptiness, and emptiness is the essence of clarity. Now the awareness of indivisible clarity and emptiness returns to nakedness and dwells within itself in the uncreated state. That is the Svabhavakaya, and now its inherent creative energy manifests everywhere without obstruction. That is the compassionate Nirmanakaya. O child of noble family, look in this way without distraction. As soon as you recognize complete awakening in the four kayas is certain, do not be distracted. This is the boundary where Buddhas and sentient beings are separated. It is said of this time, in a single moment the difference is made. In a single moment, perfect awakening. This single moment is the moment of recognition. It's the moment of mind recognizing itself, of mind recognizing its inherent empty, luminous clarity. I wanted to read that translation because, again, the translation in the original text, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is just a little different. Again, it says, meditate on the samadhi of the great symbol. If you do not know how to meditate, now here it's translated it differently. It's look closely at the nature of what makes you afraid, and you will see emptiness which has no nature whatsoever. This is called the Dharmakaya. And I think she changed the translation from look nakedly at the nature of what makes you afraid to instead look closely at the essence of who it is within you that feels fear. To again really point out the non-dual quality of what we're asked to recognize at this point in meditation. So it was interesting to me that she changed the translation. Anyways, to go on, as she says in Luminous Emptiness, the text that we read for tonight, the way of recognition, which is described here, is the ultimate view, the highest teaching. There's no need to change anything in our nature. In other words, there's nothing to add, nothing to take away. Recognition is all that's needed. The only difference between Buddhas and sentient beings is that sentient beings don't know that they are Buddhas. So this is the final chance to attain liberation before being drawn to rebirth, where it becomes much harder to escape from the wheel of samsara. As she says, until about halfway through the bardo of becoming, we still feel connected to our old bodies and former homes. With the power of clairvoyance that we have, we're able to see and hear all that's happening and look into the minds of people in the world. And the great danger here is any emotional reaction we have at this point in the bardo can be very powerful and can really shift, so that a sudden burst of anger or passion could dramatically affect our direction in the bardo. So again, it's a time when because the mind isn't anchored to a body, that it's very easily swayed by intense emotion. This is how it's described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. O child of noble family, to sum up, now your mind in the bardo state has no support, so it is light and mobile, and whatever thought arises in it, good or bad, is very powerful. So do not think of any evil actions, but remember the practice of virtue. If you have no practice, feel devotion and pure thoughts. Supplicate your yidam, the deity that you visualize if you're doing visualization practice, or supplicate the Lord of Great Compassion, Avalokiteshvara. And again, it repeats the inspiration prayer that we read at the end of the bardo of Dharmata. When parted from beloved friends, wandering alone, my own projections, empty forms appear. May the Buddhas send out the power of their compassion so that the bardo's terrors do not come. When I suffer through the power of evil karma, may my yidam clear away all suffering. When the sound of Dharmata roars like 1,000 thunders, may it all become the sound of the 6 syllables. The 6 syllables, again, are the mantra Om Mane Padme Hum, which evokes Avalokiteshvara, Amitabha. When I follow my karma without a refuge, may the Lord of great compassion be my refuge. When I suffer the karma of unconscious tendencies, may the samadhi of bliss and luminosity arise. And then it says we should say this prayer fervently because it will certainly lead you on the path. Be absolutely convinced that it is not false. This is very important. And then again, it's hoped that this will bring about some kind of recognition. But again, the danger of the emotion, of the kinds of emotional experiences we might have at this point in Dharmata, Bardo of becoming. The Bardo being knows that he or she is dead and is able to see people on earth, knows that they won't respond, but can actually see into their minds because, again, the power of mind is clairvoyance. And they may, as it says in the text, they might feel desire for their possessions. They may be resentful that other people have taken their possessions. They may feel attachment to whatever comfort and security they had in a past life. And it's at this point, it's really, really important to recognize what's happening and be able to let go of grasping, or let go of anger and resentment and envy. And this can be anything up to even resentment of how people are, as it says in the text, conducting funeral rites, that we can see in their minds whatever insincerity they might be experiencing. And the recommendation here, first of all, this is a place where I think, just to point out again to Lojong practice, that if we've actually done Lojong practice, remember some of the slogans: don't expect applause, don't expect more, be grateful to everyone, be patient whichever of the two occurs. If we can remember any of those, that's really one of the states of mind that would be very helpful at this point. That we want to counteract feelings of grasping and aggression at this point. We must remember that everything we see is our own distorted perceptions, like seeing our. The other thing we could do, as she says, is we must try to arouse sacred vision, knowing that beings in their pure essential nature are Buddhas, that beings in their pure essential nature, that our friends are the community of Sangha, that we would hear their words as the holy Dharma and their thoughts as the wisdom of Buddha. This is, again, sacred vision or sacred outlook. Seeing things in this way transforms ordinary, fallible human actions into pure actions, which would be of great benefit to us. The way it's described, again, very briefly in the Tibetan Book of the Dead,
What page?
The bottom of page 79. It is no use but very harmful. So, however impurely the rituals are performed by spiritual friends you have left behind, this is the part with what we're asked to generate in terms of sacred vision. Think with pure faith and devotion. Well, my projections must be impure. How can there be impurity in Buddha's words? They're caused by my own impure perceptions, like seeing the faults of my own face reflected in the mirror. As for those people, their body is the Sangha, their speech is the holy Dharma, and their mind is the nature of the Buddha. Therefore I take refuge in them. Then whatever is done in the place you have left will help you. So it's very important to have pure thoughts in this way. Do not forget it. So again, this is being read to the person in the bardo, and it's a reminder that they can actually see people, even if they aren't conducting ceremonies, aren't mourning in exactly the way that reinforces one's ego. That's the impure perception part, that there's still something there in terms of compassion and love, and that they're, manifest as representatives of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And it's said that even if we've caused great harm, if we are able to see teachers and friends performing rituals for us with great faith and devotion. The joy and gratitude we feel, and this is the emotions of joy and gratitude, that's what we, if we can experience that, we feel will cause us to go to a higher realm. So even beings with negative karma, if they're able to open their hearts at that point, can go to, be freed perhaps of the lower realms. What this reminded me of is what I was told, again, when I first joined the Sangha in Boulder so many years ago. I was living at Marpa House, and there was a woman there who had a terminal illness and was dying. And what I was told, Trungpa Rinpoche told her to do, well, first, in preparation for dying, was to practice Tonglen. But the other thing was to keep in mind, whoever it might be, to think of people who have been kind to you. Think of people who have in some way been kind to you. And I think this is exactly why, because it opens the heart with joy and gratitude, and will clear away the otherwise negative feelings that we might experience at this point in time. Anyway, about halfway through the bardo of existence, the bardo of becoming, she says about 4.5 days, we'll begin to feel increasingly drawn to our next life, and we'll see again the colors of the 6 realms, that they begin to shine, as she says, soft and inviting. White for the realm of the gods, red for the jealous gods, blue for the human realm, green for the animal realm, yellow for the hungry ghost realm, and kind of a smoky grayish black color for hell realm. And the brightest of these will be the realm that we're going to be born into. And she says the most important thing now is to avoid being attracted to any of the 6 realms. That there's still, even at this point, a chance of awakening into a Nirmanakaya pure realm. It's not as great a liberation or step of progress on the path, perhaps, as the opportunities that we've had earlier in the bardo. But it's still possible to awaken into a Nirmanakaya pure realm, where we continue to progress along the path. And she says that the colored lights that we experience, the different 6 colors, these lights of 6 colors representing the 6 realms, represent the mental states that cause the realms of samsara. And again, they appear before us from within our own mind. So again, the fact that we're having a dualistic experience is one reason why we become confused. They appear before us from within our own mind and lure us with all the force of our karmic tendencies, our instinctive urge to return to our old way of life. And as she says, we can feel this magnetic attraction in our lives now when we're pulled in certain directions by our emotions, yet at the same time we might have a sense of the possibility of resting in a state of equanimity and openness instead of being led by habit. And she says, even in meditation, there might be times when we feel nostalgia for and longing to return to our ordinary ways. Trungpa Rinpoche used to talk about this a lot. He said, sometimes we have nostalgia for suffering. I remember him very clearly saying, we think back when we had samsara, we had great fun. And we forget all about the suffering, and we forget about the cyclic nature of samsara and the endless cycle of birth and rebirth, and totally at the mercy of our karma. And just think, this selective memory, this instinctive urge to return to our old way of life. And so, for that reason, the instruction here is about transforming our perceptions of the 6 realms through the practice of sacred vision again. And it says, if we have practiced deity yoga, so if we've done visualization practice, again, we could meditate on the lights as being the deity, whatever our deity was. Or if we haven't, we could think of the light as being of the essence again of the Lord of Great Compassion, Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of Great Compassion. We can imagine that whatever we see is the compassionate presence of the deity, realizing, and we could realize the essence of the deity as empty appearance, inseparable. This is the instruction in the Luminous Emptiness and the Tibetan Book of the Dead that talks about visualizing, letting go, dissolving and arising, as she says, until we transcend the distinctions between real and unreal, and the concept of a separate self becomes meaningless. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, on page 81, it's described this way: meditate for a long time on whichever deity is your yidam as a vision, without any real nature of its own, like an illusion. This is called the pure illusory body. Then let the yidam disappear from the edges inwards and rest for a while in the inconceivable state of emptiness luminosity, which consists in nothing whatever. Meditate again on the yidam, then again on the luminosity. Meditate like this alternately, and after that let your mind too disappear from the edges inward. Wherever there is space, there is mind, and wherever there is mind, there is the Dharmakaya. Rest in the state of simplicity and selflessness of the Dharmakaya. So, it's getting a little late, but maybe we can actually do something like this by taking a good posture and allowing ourselves to settle here where we are. Straighten our backs, settle into our seat, allow ourselves to slow down, let go. Perhaps just feel the breathing. Let thoughts come and go as they will without engaging. And as we settle, open ourselves, let our senses be open. Again, just feel the breathing for a moment. Just let our minds naturally open. Open to awareness. And now, in nowness, where does mind stop? How far does awareness go? Where does mind stop and the world begin? Is there anything we experience that isn't mind? Again, just look directly. And then come back to the breathing. Let go of thoughts. And just rest in the simplicity of just this present moment. And to continue, back to the text. Simplicity, as Francesca Fremantle says, simplicity here refers to the absence of mental manifestations without expansion or elaborations. In other words, nothing's added. There's just naked, direct experience, naked, clear perception. Or as Trungpa Rinpoche said, experience free of the complexities of samsara or nirvana. And she says this is based on the understanding that phenomena have no independent existence, but arise from mind's spontaneous self-display. So that's what was, in my perhaps clumsy way, asking people to explore. How far does mind go? Is there anything we experience that isn't mind? Anyway. And again, the Dharmakaya is the state of non-dual omniscience in which luminous awareness, just this very direct, simple experience of awareness that we have, is the luminous awareness that knows everything as itself by its own light. When we're able to fully rest in that experience, there's no grasping by the self as subject and no phenomena existing separately as object. It's all just mind's awareness. Aware that it's aware, mind's awareness of itself. If we're able to rest in this state with some degree of stability, we can awaken into a pure land. This is what we're asked to do as bardo beings at this point. We can awaken into pure land instead of returning to samsara. And as Francesca Fremantle says, similarly, in everyday experience, if we can rest in openness and equanimity, that's where we don't get caught up in picking and choosing, passion, aggression, and ignorance. If we can rest in openness and equanimity, even for a short time, it'll prevent us from drifting into the next emotional reaction that beckons to us. And I think all of us have had that experience through meditation practice and in our lives. In any case, to return to the text, we're almost done. With the sensation of possessing a mental body, the Gandharva of the Bardo consciousness feels extremely vulnerable and disoriented, again, because there's more solidification. So there's more hope and fear, more desperation, and begins searching for any place of refuge, and will feel pursued, and this is described in the Book of the Dead, will feel pursued by entities of some kind or another through wind, snow, darkness, and hail. And again, and those who have led evil lives will feel they're fleeing into greater misery, while those who have led good lives feel they're traveling toward happiness. But again, there's just a sense of being driven forward. And then at this point, the Gandharva being, the mental body of the person who's died, who's in the bardo, begins to have visions of men and women in sexual union, having intercourse. And if they have the right connection with their future parents and their present, it has the opportunity, as she says, to slip in between the sperm and ovum as they unite and enter into a womb. And at this point, and this is where we're going to end for tonight, at this point, the instruction to the dead person is to close the womb door. That's the title of this chapter. at the womb's door, to close the womb door that's about to be entered. And it says there are two methods of trying to accomplish this. One, again, is deity practice. And again, if there's no person doesn't have a connection to a deity, then they're asked to meditate again on Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, Amitabha, the different Avalokiteshvara, Amitabha, are different manifestations of the same basic principle. Then the person can merge into the luminous emptiness of the deity's presence, and so doesn't proceed any further toward womb birth, to rebirth. If that does not work, there are 5 different ways of shutting the womb's door, which is what we'll be talking about next week. But at this point, let's see if there's one last piece I wanted to read in here, if I can find it. This is the instruction if you do not know how to meditate on if you don't have a visualization practice, deity yoga. O child of noble family, if you do not know how to meditate like this, that's the previous instruction, remember the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and the Lord of great compassion, and supplicate them. Meditate on all the terrifying projections as the Lord of great compassion, or as your Yidam. Remember your guru, your teacher, and the secret transmission name you had in the human world, and tell it to the Dharma King, Lord of Death. Even if you fall down the precipice, you will not be hurt, so give up fear and terror. So, again, throughout, again and again, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Toltrol, we're asked to not be afraid, to remember that because of emptiness, we don't have a body that can actually be harmed in any way. That if we can remember our practice, if we can remember our teacher, if we can remember the teachings, if we can recognize, which means to actually see what our true nature is, if we have some experience of that, even glimpses of that in our meditation practice now, that it can be tremendously helpful to us. And so with that, we just have a few minutes left. I don't know if people have any questions, comments, complaints, concerns. Yes, Vicky.
Yeah, excuse me. The God of great compassion. Can you tell, excuse me, can you tell a little more about who that is?
Well, again, it's in Nirmanakaya form, it's the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. But it takes all, there are a lot of different manifestations of compassion. So in the, we have the peaceful deities, the Amitabha is usually that manifestation of Avalokiteshvara is a Sambhogakaya Buddha. The Tara is another manifestation of the same principle. And basically, the story of Avalokiteshvara is he took a vow to save all sentient beings, and apparently he was able to liberate all kinds of beings, and came back to, the story is that he came back to the Buddha, probably not in human form, this is probably, and said, I've liberated all these beings, and the Buddha said, look behind you, and he could just see countless beings that, infinite beings in all the different realms that were still trapped in samsara, still trapped in, the mind. So his vow was to liberate all beings. It's said that the Pure Land of Amitabha, that he established the Pure Land where it's particularly easy to practice the teachings and attain enlightenment, that when we're asked to think about, if you remember the beginning of the text where it talked about the ejection of consciousness practice. And throughout, when it mentions a Buddha, a Pure Land, it's talking about the Pure Land of Amitabha, which is again a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara. So it's considered, again, one of the great bodhisattvas is, the embodiment of compassion, concern, care for all sentient beings. I don't know, maybe John can say more. We also read about him in the Heart Sutra. He is this Avalokiteshvara who recites the wisdom that's through the power of the Buddha in the Heart Sutra, beginning with form as emptiness, emptiness is form, because that's actually an expression of absolute bodhicitta, but it's at that point where if you've attained that level of understanding that you begin to become truly able to benefit beings because of the clarity of your intention and intelligence. Carolyn, and then Kimberly's iPad.
Thank you. What about Kuan Yin?
I think that's the same principle in Chinese Buddhism. It's the
Okay.
same principle again.
Yeah,
It's
I've
Chinese.
seen them. John?
It's Chinese.
Yeah, Chinese.
Okay, I've been so drawn to meditating to her in the last day and a half. It's
I think it's
wonderful.
I think it's a Amida in Japanese Buddhism, but I'm not sure. But it's the same principle, just translated slightly different ways in different cultures. Kimberly,
Thank you.
I don't know who it's.
Michael, in the beginning, I read the Fremantle quote that said, by the law of karma, here are the consequences of our thoughts, words, and deeds. And I didn't realize that thoughts had karmic consequences. Do all thoughts have consequences, or what am I missing?
Well, I think it's thoughts that ultimately lead to actions. But yeah, the idea is that, again, this gets into karma that only a Buddha understands, so you're asking the wrong person to some degree. But my understanding is that yes, because thoughts create a predilection, the main aspect of karma is that it creates in regard to thoughts, is it creates the seed for the next thought. And or at least creates some momentum in that way. And again, because there's awareness, and because ultimately karma, especially from a Mahayana and Vajrayana point of view, is like what do they call it? Adventitious stain. It's not fundamental to who we are. There's always the possibility that we can do something different. But the reality is, a lot of the times, once we're angry, once we're passionate, once we're really caught up in dullness and ignorance, it's very easy to go from that thought to the next thought. If you remember in the Hinayana the Profound Treasury, where Trungpa Rinpoche talks about the power of flickering thoughts, and how the most demonic action can begin just by like a little flicker of anger. So there's karma in that. Yes, actually taking action and acting on those thoughts, that creates even more intense karma, because it's even more solid. It's even more to actually, attack somebody, for instance, to become angry enough that you actually become assaulted. Things have to become pretty solid. But you can have a lot of irritated thoughts that you kind of keep to yourself. And if there's not awareness of that, and some letting go, or some, kind of perception that, I'm getting carried away here, then yeah, there's karma in thoughts too. It's not as intense as the karma that comes through action, verbalize, if you actually say or do, then yes, that has, as far as, again, my understanding is that creates heavier karma. It creates more habituation. It creates greater momentum. But even the thought, the potentiality is there.
Okay, thanks.
Consider the hell realms. The suffering of the hell realms, it's mental as well as physical. So it's thought and emotion that produces that suffering. Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, it's time for us to close. So we'll thank everyone, and we have discussion group tomorrow night for those who are able and wish to attend. Should also say that I have a schedule conflict next week, so I won't be here. But John will describe how to close the womb door and all the other things.
We'll be finishing the chapter together next week
Yeah.
in preparation for a break.
Yes. And then yes. All right. So I'm going to put up the dedication of merit, and we can dedicate
One
the
last
merit.
thing. After the next text we're going to use is a text I have just started reading recently and love. It's this text, Mingyur Rinpoche, In Love with the World. It's really lovely. By Mingyur Rinpoche. He was one of the three sons, well, actually four, of Tulku Ujum, a great teacher. And the other sons that you might know are Tsokni Rinpoche, who's Mingyur Rinpoche's half-brother, and Chiki Nima Rinpoche, who's a little more obscure, but he's also a half-brother. And all three of those are teachers, and then there's a fourth who's not a teacher. But I think we're really going to love this book.
Can you put the title in the chat?
In Love with the World? Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. And while he's doing that, I'll mute us all and find the chat. And we'll close by dedicating the merit generated through our practice and study for the benefit of all sentient beings. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
See you
Bye.
tomorrow, Chinyi.
Okay.